The massive alien ship appeared without warning at the edge of Jupiter's orbit. It gleamed like polished metal under the distant sunlight, its smooth surface unmarked by visible engines or weapons. Admiral Susan Miller stood on the bridge of the Earth flagship Defiance, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her weathered face remained calm, though her fingers tapped nervously against the arm of her command chair. "Status report," she ordered. Lieutenant Alan Peterson looked up from his communications console. "The alien vessel is broadcasting on all frequencies, Admiral. They're requesting permission to send a delegation aboard." Susan nodded slowly. Humanity had prepared for this moment for generations. First contact with an advanced alien civilization. "Grant permission, prepare the diplomatic reception area, and alert Chief Engineer Carter that we'll have visitors." The Defiance was humanity's pride, a massive nuclear-powered battleship that served as the flagship of Earth's defense fleet. Its hull was thick, reinforced metal with visible welding seams. Massive railgun turrets protruded from strategic points, and the nuclear engines at the rear glowed with controlled fusion power. An hour later, Susan stood in the reception area as a shimmer of light appeared, materializing into 6 tall, slender aliens. Their skin was a pale blue with elongated heads and large black eyes. They wore uniforms of a material that seemed to flow like liquid metal. The tallest stepped forward. "I am Ambassador Zixtral of the Galactic Coalition. We greet Earth and welcome you to the galactic community." Susan bowed slightly. "Admiral Susan Miller of Earth Defense Fleet, we welcome you to our solar system." Zixtral's large eyes blinked slowly as they scanned the room. "We detected your vessels at the edge of your system. We were surprised to find a spacefaring civilization using such interesting technology." Susan caught the slight hesitation, the careful choice of words. "We would be happy to provide a tour of our vessel, Ambassador." The delegation followed Susan through the corridors of the Defiance. At each step, the aliens exchanged glances, sometimes making small sounds that their translation devices didn't convert. When they reached the engine room, John Carter, the chief engineer, greeted them with a proud smile. He was a stocky man with calloused hands and a beard streaked with gray. "Welcome to the heart of the Defiance," he said, gesturing to the massive nuclear reactor that powered the ship. One of the aliens, wearing what appeared to be technical insignia, stepped forward. "You power your vessels with nuclear fission?" "Fusion," John corrected. "Third-generation controlled fusion reactors." The alien made a sound that the translator finally interpreted as laughter. "Fascinating. We haven't seen fusion drives used for primary propulsion in, well, several thousand years." John's smile faltered, but he maintained his composure. "It's reliable technology. Gets the job done." As the tour continued to the weapon systems, the aliens' amusement became more obvious. When they saw the massive railguns that served as the Defiance's main armament, Zixtral couldn't contain his reaction. "You fire physical projectiles?" he asked, no longer bothering to hide his disbelief. "Actual metal slugs?" "Tungsten carbide. Rounds accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed," the weapons officer Greg Harris explained. Greg was tall and lean with a serious expression. "They pack quite a punch." "I'm sure they do," Zixtral said, not bothering to hide the condescension in his voice. "Against targets without basic energy deflection systems, they would be quite effective." Susan noticed Greg's jaw tighten, but he said nothing. The tour continued to the bridge, where the aliens observed the crew at their stations. The ship's computers with their physical keyboards and display screens drew particular attention. "Your technology is charming," Zixtral said. "It reminds me of historical displays in our museums." One of the other aliens leaned toward Zixtral and spoke in their native language, apparently forgetting the universal translators were active. "These humans are like children playing with toys," the translator conveyed before the alien realized his mistake and fell silent. Susan pretended not to hear, but she noticed several crew members stiffen at their stations. After the tour, Susan escorted the delegation to a conference room. The aliens sat across from her, their posture relaxed and confident. The Galactic Coalition welcomes all spacefaring species, Zixtral began. We offer protection, technological assistance, and membership in our community. That's very generous, Susan replied carefully. What would Earth provide in return? Zixtral smiled, an expression that didn't reach his large black eyes. Access to your system's resources would be a start. Your asteroid belt and outer planets contain materials valuable to the Coalition. In return, we would provide technological upgrades to bring your civilization into the modern era. Susan kept her expression neutral. I see, and if we prefer to maintain our independence? The alien's smile faded. Admiral Miller, I don't think you understand your position. Your fleet is... He paused, searching for a diplomatic term. Inadequate for the realities of galactic politics. There are species far less benevolent than the Coalition who would see your planets as easy targets. Are you threatening us, Ambassador? Susan asked, her voice level. Not at all. I'm simply stating facts. Primitive species have little choice in galactic politics. They either accept protection or... He left the sentence unfinished. I'll need to consult with Earth's Defense Council before making any decisions, Susan said. Of course, we will remain in your system and await your response. Take no more than 3 of your Earth months. Zixtral stood. We look forward to welcoming humans into the Coalition. After the aliens departed, Susan called an emergency meeting with her senior staff in a secure room that was regularly swept for listening devices. Well, that was humiliating, John Carter said, his face flushed with anger. They treated us like we were showing them stone axes and wooden clubs. Kate Williams, the ship's intelligence officer, spoke up. She was a quiet woman with sharp eyes and an analytical mind. Their behavior matches a pattern. I've been studying their communication signals since they arrived. They've referenced integration protocols several times. What does that mean? Susan asked. I believe they've done this before, Kate explained. They find developing civilizations, make them feel technologically inferior, then offer protection that's really just occupation. Greg Harris nodded grimly. Those weapons they barely tried to hide? Energy-based, like they mentioned, designed to create controlled quantum disruptions. Effective, but predictable. So what do? John asked. We can't match their technology. Susan was quiet for a moment, then a small smile formed on her lips. Maybe we don't have to match it. Maybe we just have to surprise them. She turned to Kate. I want everything you can learn about their ships, their weapons, their tactics. If they've done this before, they probably follow patterns. She looked at each of her officers. They think we're primitive, using outdated technology. That's fine. Let them think that. It might be the only advantage we have. As the meeting ended, Susan stayed behind, looking out the viewport at the distant gleam of the Coalition ship. For generations, humanity had prepared for first contact, building their ships to be functional, reliable, and straightforward. The HFY aliens saw this as primitive, but Susan knew better. Sometimes the oldest weapons were the ones enemies never saw coming. 3 months passed quickly. The Coalition ships remained at the edge of the solar system, a constant reminder of their presence. Their sleek vessels occasionally moved between planets, scanning and observing. Admiral Susan Miller stood before the Earth Defense Council in the underground chamber beneath New Geneva. The room was circular with 12 seats arranged around a central holographic display. Representatives from all major Earth territories watched her with concerned expressions. They're getting impatient, Susan said, pointing to the holographic display showing Coalition ships moving closer to Mars and Europa colonies. In the past week, they've sent 3 messages demanding our answer. Council President Frank Wilson leaned forward. He was an older man with silver hair and deep wrinkles around his eyes. What are our options, Admiral? Limited, if we're being honest about our visible capabilities, Susan replied. Their ships outclass ours in every conventional category. Faster, better armed, better shielded. But we're not being honest, are we? The voice came from the back of the room. Greg Harris stepped forward from the shadows. The weapons specialist rarely attended council meetings, preferring to stay in his development facilities deep under the Pacific Ocean. What do you mean, Harris? President Wilson asked. Greg smiled slightly. We've been expecting first contact for over a century. Did you really think we were just sitting around building outdated ships for fun? He pressed a button on his wrist device and the holographic display changed to show detailed schematics of the Defiance and other human vessels. What you're seeing is the public design of our fleet, Greg explained. Now, let me show you what's actually under the hood. The display shifted again and gasps filled the room. The same ships appeared, but with hidden compartments, concealed weapon systems, and technological components that looked nothing like the visible exterior. Operation Trojan Horse, Greg said. For decades, we've been building our fleet with deliberately outdated external appearances while developing revolutionary technologies inside. Why wasn't the council informed? Demanded Representative Maria Lopez, her voice sharp with anger. Security, Susan answered. The fewer people who knew, the better. Even most of my crew doesn't know what their ships are truly capable of. Ixalquamagig nodded. Think about it. Any advanced civilization capable of interstellar travel would likely monitor our communications, our building activities. By maintaining the appearance of a young, developing species using nuclear propulsion and physical weapons, we've kept our true capabilities hidden. The council members whispered among themselves until President Wilson raised his hand for silence. Explain these hidden capabilities, Harris. Greg pointed to different parts of the schematics. What appears to be nuclear engines are actually quantum manipulation drives capable of instant position shifting. The railguns? They use gravity manipulation technology that accelerates projectiles to near-light speed. And the hull? Reactive metal alloy that can change properties under electrical stimulation. Susan stepped forward. We're not as helpless as the coalition believes. But we still need more information before we can act. As if on cue, the chamber doors opened, and Kate Williams entered. The intelligence officer looked tired, her eyes ringed with dark circles. Sorry to interrupt, she said, but you all need to see this. She connected her data pad to the central display. Images and data streams appeared showing coalition ships and other alien vessels. I've been intercepting and decoding their communications, Kate explained. The coalition has done this before, 17 times to be exact. They find developing civilizations, intimidate them with technological superiority, then establish protective occupation. She displayed images of different worlds with coalition bases and mining operations. Once established, they strip mine resources and keep the native populations as cheap labor. And if the species resists? Asked President Wilson. Kate's expression hardened. Orbital bombardment of major population centers until resistance ends. They call it pacification. The room fell silent as the council members absorbed this information. There's more, Kate continued. They've set a deadline. They're not waiting for our full 3 months. They're planning to enter Earth orbit in 72 hours with their main fleet. 20 ships instead of the 3 we've seen so far. Susan straightened her uniform. Then we need to make our preparations now. Greg, how quickly can the fleet be activated with the hidden systems? The systems are already installed and functional, Greg replied. We just need to initialize the Lazarus protocol to bring them online. 6 hours at most. Do it, President Wilson ordered. Admiral Miller, you have full authority to defend Earth and our colonies by any means necessary. As the meeting ended, Susan pulled Kate aside. You look exhausted. When did you last sleep? Kate managed a weak smile. Sleep is overrated. I've been working with Alan Peterson from Communications. That kid is brilliant. He's the one who actually broke their encryption codes. I need both of you sharp for what's coming, Susan said. Get 4 hours of rest, then meet me on the Defiance. 6 hours later, Susan stood on the bridge of the Defiance. The ship hummed with a different energy now that the hidden systems were in standby mode, ready to activate on her command. John Carter appeared at her side, his expression worried. The crew is asking questions about the new system initializations. Tell them it's a software update, Susan replied. The fewer who know before we have to reveal ourselves, the better. The communications officer, Alan Peterson, turned from his console. He was young, barely 25, with quick eyes and quicker fingers. Admiral, incoming transmission from the Coalition flagship. On screen, Susan ordered. Ambassador Zixtral's face appeared. His expression was no longer diplomatically neutral but openly condescending. Admiral Miller, your time for consideration has ended. The Coalition requires your answer regarding Earth's integration. Susan kept her face carefully blank. We appreciate your offer, Ambassador, but Earth will remain independent. We're not interested in joining the Coalition under the terms you've presented. Zixtral's large eyes narrowed. I don't think you understand, Admiral. This isn't a negotiation. Our main fleet arrives in 48 hours. You can surrender peacefully, or we will demonstrate why your independence is unrealistic. Is that a threat, Ambassador? Susan asked, her voice cool. It's a reality you would be wise to accept, Zixtral replied. Our scans show your pitiful fleet gathered near Mars. Is that meant to intimidate us? Ships with nuclear propulsion and metal projectile. Weapons? Susan allowed herself a small smile. We're just protecting our territory, Ambassador. Your territory will soon be Coalition territory, Zixtral said. I had hoped you would be reasonable, but it seems humans are as primitive in thinking as they are in technology. The transmission ended abruptly. Well, that was direct, John muttered. Gather the fleet commanders for briefing, Susan ordered. It's time they learned what their ships can really do. As the officers assembled in the secure briefing room, Susan looked at her core team. John, Greg, Kate, and Alan. They had all known the truth and kept the secret. Now, 20 other ship captains were about to learn that humanity's ancient fleet was anything but primitive. Ladies and gentlemen, Susan began, what I'm about to tell you will change everything you thought you knew about our fleet. For years you've commanded what you believed were simple nuclear-powered warships. Today you'll learn what your ships can actually do. She nodded to Greg, who activated the display showing the true capabilities of the human fleet. The Coalition thinks they're facing museum pieces, Susan said with a grim smile. Let's show them just how wrong they are. The Coalition fleet arrived earlier than expected. 20 sleek warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel near Mars orbit, their polished hulls gleaming in the sunlight. Each ship was at least twice the size of the Defiance, with smooth surfaces unmarked by visible weapons or engines. On the Defiance's bridge, Alan Peterson's hands moved quickly across his console. Admiral, they're broadcasting on all frequencies. Message is, they're demanding immediate surrender of all human colonies and Earth itself. Susan Miller stood calmly, her hands clasped behind her back. Earth's fleet of 30 vessels formed a defensive line between Mars and the approaching Coalition ships. From the outside, they looked hopelessly outmatched. Bulky, welded metal ships with visible engine sections and weapon turrets facing sleek, advanced alien vessels. Open a channel, Susan ordered. When the communication system activated, she spoke clearly. This is Admiral Susan Miller of the Earth Defense Fleet. Your demand for surrender is rejected. The Sol system is sovereign human territory. You are ordered to withdraw immediately. Ambassador Zixtral's face appeared on the main screen. He wasn't even trying to hide his amusement anymore. Admiral Miller, I see you've gathered your antique collection to greet us. How quaint. He gestured to someone off screen. I've been authorized to offer you one final opportunity to surrender peacefully. Otherwise, we will be forced to demonstrate our technological superiority. Susan's expression remained neutral. We will defend our home, Ambassador. Zixtral sighed, dramatically. Such a waste. Our scans show your vessel still using nuclear propulsion and physical ammunition. You cannot hope to match our capabilities. Perhaps not, Susan replied, but we will fight regardless. Very well. The alien's expression hardened. Your primitive bravery is admirable but misplaced. Prepare to be pacified. The transmission ended. John Carter moved to stand beside Susan. They're powering up weapons. Systems, Admiral. All ships, defensive formation Delta, Susan ordered. Hold position and prepare to receive fire. The human fleet arranged itself in a scattered pattern, seemingly random but actually carefully planned by Greg Harris to maximize their initial deception. The first energy blasts from the Coalition ships streaked across space, striking 3 human vessels directly. The impacts were devastating, tearing through the outer hulls and sending debris spinning into the void. Harper, Lee, and Rodriguez reporting heavy damage, Alan called out, his young face pale but composed. Their outer hulls are breached. Susan nodded, watching the tactical display. Tell them to maintain emergency protocols. Status of Coalition formation? They're spreading out, preparing for another volley, Kate Williams reported from the tactical station. They think this is going to be easy. The Coalition ships fired again, their energy weapons slicing through more human vessels. The bridge crew of the Defiance watched as apparent destruction rained down on their fleet. Admiral, John said quietly, we're taking a beating. The outer hulls won't hold much longer. Susan checked the tactical display one more time. The Coalition fleet had fully committed to their attack pattern, confident in their superiority. Their ships had spread out to surround the human fleet exactly as Greg had predicted they would. All ships, Susan said into the fleet-wide channel, her voice steady. Activate Lazarus Protocol. Authorization Miller 7 Delta 9. Across the human fleet, the seemingly catastrophic damage suddenly paused. The broken hulls, the venting atmosphere, the floating debris, all of it froze in place. On the Defiance, Greg Harris smiled as he entered the final command sequence. Lazarus Protocol activated, Admiral. Shedding our old skin now. Throughout the fleet, the outer hulls of the human ships began to change. What had appeared to be broken, damaged metal now shifted and reformed. The bulky welded plates fell away, revealing sleek, darker surfaces underneath. The visible damage disappeared, as if it had never existed. What's happening? Alan asked, staring at the view screen in amazement despite having been briefed on the plan. Reactive metamaterial outer hull, Greg explained, unable to hide his pride. Designed to take hits and make them look devastating while protecting the real hull underneath. Perfect for making enemies think they've won. The Coalition ships paused their attack, clearly confused by what they were seeing. Now, Susan ordered, activate true propulsion systems and weapons. John Carter's hands flew over his engineering console. Quantum drives online, Admiral. Movement capabilities at 100%. Where the human ships had previously been, limited to nuclear propulsion with visible exhaust, they now moved with startling speed. The Defiance shot forward, covering the distance to the nearest Coalition vessel in seconds rather than the minutes it would have taken before. They're trying to communicate, Alan reported. Ignore them, Susan ordered. All ships initiate attack. Pattern Omega. Target their propulsion systems first. The human fleet moved with coordinated precision. What had appeared to be simple railgun turrets now glowed with energy as they powered up. When they fired, they didn't launch physical projectiles, as the Coalition expected. Instead, they released focused gravity distortion fields that crushed anything in their path. 3 Coalition ships crumpled inward as the gravitational weapons hit them, their hulls buckling under forces they weren't designed to withstand. What just happened? Kate asked, watching the tactical display update with real-time information. Gravity manipulation weapons, Greg explained. They expected kinetic impacts they could deflect with their shields. Instead, we're distorting space itself around their hulls. The Coalition ships began to return fire, but they were disorganized now, their neat formation broken. Their energy weapons still posed a threat, but the human ships moved too quickly, shifting position in ways that defied conventional physics. Quantum position shifting online, John reported. They can't lock onto us effectively. On the main view screen, Susan watched as the Coalition flagship, Zixtral's vessel, fired repeatedly at the Defiance, only to hit empty space as the human ship shifted its position instantaneously. Open a channel to the Coalition flagship, Susan ordered. When Zixtral's face appeared on screen, his usual composure was completely gone. His large eyes were wide with shock and confusion. What is this? He demanded. Our scans showed primitive technology, nuclear engines, physical weapons. Susan allowed herself a small smile. You saw what we wanted you to see, Ambassador. Humanity learned long ago that appearing less advanced than you actually are can be a significant tactical advantage. This is impossible, Zixtral insisted. Your species couldn't have developed quantum manipulation technology or gravity weapons. You're too young. We developed along different lines than you expected, Susan replied. Your mistake was assuming there's only one path of technological advancement. As they spoke, the battle continued around them. The human fleet executed complex maneuvers that would have been impossible with their supposed technology. Half of the coalition vessels were already disabled, their propulsion systems crushed by gravity weapons, or their hulls breached by targeted attacks. John, Susan said, turning to her chief engineer, activate the shield grid. John nodded and entered the command. Across the human fleet, energy fields sprang into existence, connecting all 30 vessels into a unified defensive network. Fleet shield grid active, John reported. Power levels optimal. On the view screen, Zixtral was receiving reports from his own officers. His expression shifted from shock to something closer to fear. You've been hiding your true capabilities, he said accusingly. You deceived us deliberately. Yes, Susan agreed simply. We did. The remaining coalition ships began to withdraw, pulling back into a defensive formation. Their initial confidence was completely gone, replaced by confusion and uncertainty. Admiral Miller, Allen called out, they're calling for a ceasefire, requesting immediate negotiations. Susan looked around at her bridge crew, at John's proud smile, Kate's satisfied nod, Greg's quiet confidence, and Allen's youthful excitement. Then she turned back to the screen where Zixtral waited for her answer. Tell the ambassador we accept, she said. I think it's time we had an honest conversation about humanity's place in the galaxy. The meeting room aboard the Defiance had been quickly converted for diplomatic purposes. The long metal table, once used for military briefings, now served as the site for the first true negotiations between humanity and the Galactic Coalition. Ambassador Zixtral sat with 4 other coalition representatives. Gone was their earlier confidence and condescension. They sat stiffly, their large eyes constantly darting to the walls and ceiling as if expecting another deception. Admiral Susan Miller entered, accompanied by Greg Harris, John Carter, Kate, Williams, and Alan Peterson. They took their seats across from the aliens without ceremony. Let's begin, Susan said simply. Zixtral's fingers tapped nervously on the table. Before negotiations commence, the coalition demands an explanation. How does a supposedly young species possess technology that surpasses even Viridian achievements? Susan nodded to Greg, who activated a holographic display in the center of the table. It showed Earth's technological development timeline. The simple answer? We lied, Greg said. For over a century, Earth has been preparing for first contact. While we publicly developed conventional space technology, nuclear propulsion, basics, shields, physical weapons, our real work happened in secret. The hologram showed hidden facilities beneath Earth's oceans and inside asteroids. But why? One of the other aliens asked. Why pretend to be less advanced? Because of species like yours, Kate replied. Her quiet voice carried unexpected weight. Our history is filled with stories of more advanced civilizations destroying less developed ones. We decided that when we met aliens we would appear friendly, but primitive until we knew their intentions. Susan leaned forward. We built 2 fleets, the one you could see and the one you couldn't. The visible fleet used conventional technology as a cover for our true capabilities. Impossible, Zixtral insisted, though with less certainty than before. Our scientists estimate it would take a species at least 1,000 years to develop quantum manipulation and gravity control after achieving spaceflight. John Carter laughed. Your scientists followed a predictable development path. Humans didn't. The hologram changed to show various technological branches. Most species develop technology linearly, Greg explained. First chemical rockets, then nuclear, then ion drives, then energy propulsion. We developed all paths simultaneously, focusing on what worked rather than what seemed most advanced. Alan, the youngest human at the table, spoke up. While our public space program used old-fashioned rockets, our classified research explored quantum physics, gravity manipulation, and space-time distortion. Zixtral's eyes narrowed. No species develops like that. Humans do, Susan said firmly. We've always been good at unconventional solutions. We had to be. Our planet's history is filled with threats that nearly destroyed us. Climate change. Nuclear weapons, artificial intelligence, we survived by thinking differently. One of the other coalition members, a scientist by his insignia, spoke for the first time. But the resources required, the coordination needed, Earth united after our last global war, Susan explained. We realized we needed to prepare for threats beyond our world. So while we appeared divided publicly, with competing nations and corporations, our true technological development was unified and focused. Kate touched a control panel and the hologram changed again. It now showed evidence of the coalition's activities on other worlds. While we're explaining things, she said, her voice gaining an edge, perhaps you can tell us why the coalition has been subjugating less advanced species throughout the galaxy? The alien representatives shifted uncomfortably. We intercepted and decoded your communications, Kate continued. 17 other species are under your protection. Their resources, stripped, their people treated as second-class citizens. Zixtral's composure cracked. We bring order and stability to the galaxy. Those species would destroy themselves without our guidance. You mean your control, Susan corrected. You deliberately keep them dependent on coalition technology. You limit their development to maintain your advantage. Alan brought up new data on the display. I found something interesting in your communication protocols. The coalition deliberately withholds technological advancement from member species. Your leadership structure ensures the Viridians remain dominant. That's classified information. Zixtral protested. Not anymore, Alan replied with a slight smile. I've already transmitted the evidence to all coalition ships in member worlds. The color drained from Zixtral's blue face. You can't do that. It will cause chaos throughout the coalition. It will cause truth, Susan countered. Those species deserve to know they've been manipulated. The youngest coalition member, who had remained silent until now, suddenly stood. The Arbari homeworld is already reporting civil unrest. The Keltani have seized 3 of our administrative centers. Ambassador, we need to return immediately. Zixtral looked defeated. What do you want, humans? Susan's expression remained firm but not unkind. Peace but on equal terms. Earth will remain independent. We will establish diplomatic relations with the coalition and its member species. All of them directly, not through you. And if we refuse? Zixtral asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Greg gestured to the view screen, showing the crippled coalition ships. Your fleet is in no position to refuse anything. But more importantly, your political structure is about to face serious challenges from within. Susan stood. We don't want domination, Ambassador. Unlike the coalition, we don't believe advancement gives us the right to control others. We want cooperation between equals. Zixtral sighed heavily. I am authorized to agree to your terms. The coalition recognizes Earth as a sovereign power and will withdraw all military forces from your system. Good, Susan said. We'll prepare a formal agreement. As the coalition representatives huddled together in worried discussion, Susan led her team into an adjoining room. Did we just change galactic politics in a single day? John asked, looking slightly stunned. Seems like it, Greg replied with a grin. Not bad for a primitive species. Kate checked her datapad. Reports coming in from throughout coalition space. At least 6 member species have declared independence already. They're requesting direct communication with Earth. Open channels. To all of them, Susan ordered. Let's build some new alliances. Alan looked thoughtful. Do you think the coalition will try to retaliate once they regroup? Susan shook her head. I doubt it. Their power was built on perceived technological superiority. Now that's gone, and their member species know they've been manipulated. The coalition as it existed is finished. 3 weeks later, the Defiance's observation deck hosted representatives from 12 formerly subjugated species. They had come from across the galaxy to meet the humans who had broken the coalition's hold. Susan watched as John enthusiastically explained Earth's engineering principles to a group of fascinated aliens. Greg and Kate were deep in conversation with others about defense technology and information sharing. Alan moved between groups, his natural diplomatic skills making him an unexpected star. An older alien approached Susan. His species had been one of the first conquered by the Coalition centuries ago. For generations, we believed we were inherently inferior, he said quietly. Your people showed us that advancement doesn't have to come at the cost of others' freedom. Susan smiled. Humans learned that lesson the hard way in our own history. We nearly destroyed ourselves several times before we understood that cooperation works better than domination. The alien gestured to the viewport, where Earth was visible as a blue-green jewel against the blackness of space. The Coalition laughed. At your ancient fleet, he said. No one is laughing now. That was the idea, Susan replied. Sometimes the best advantage is to be underestimated. As the diplomatic reception continued around her, Susan took a moment to look out at the stars. Humanity had passed its first major test in galactic politics. Not through overwhelming force, but through strategic thinking, technological innovation, and careful planning. The galaxy was a much larger place than anyone had imagined, filled with both threats and opportunities. But for the first time, Susan felt confident that humanity would find its place among the stars, not as conquerors or the conquered, but as equals. And if anyone else made the mistake of underestimating Earth based on appearances, well, they would learn the same lesson as the Coalition. Never judge a civilization by its appearance.